Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I got a little bit of a different video for you guys. With no UFC fights this weekend, I had to get my fix in somehow. So I went back and I rewatched Kamaru Usman's entire title reign. And I wanted to go over his title reign and a couple of his fights that he had on his come up because I remember thinking to myself when I was reading all the reactions on Twitter and on Instagram and whatnot when Usman had originally lost his title, of just kind of how happy everybody was that Kamaru was no longer champion, calling the same thing, calling him like a cheater, calling him boring, and the foot stomps and etc. etc. And I'll agree, he definitely had his moments of being boring, but I wanted to go back and see, just how boring was he? Just how bad of a cheater was he? Were those reactions really warranted, or was everyone just kind of like happy to get rid of a wrestler, and we were thinking, oh, we're gonna get a super exciting striker now, especially with the head kick that Leon kicked everything off with. It was a sign of potentially good things to come, and I think everyone kind of really quickly was just happy to have a striker instead of a wrestler as champion. But if you guys notice, like 4, 6 months, 7 months after that fight happened, everyone started to turn on Edwards and started to go, hey, where's the fight announcement? Where's the activity? Everyone knows you're going to fight Colby. What's the holdup on the announcement, et cetera, et cetera. And then I started to see a lot more tweets of people going, hey, maybe we took Usman for granted. Look at how active he was. Look at, the kind of performances he was putting on. And I just don't know if I've ever seen like that quick of a 180 and then another 180 on a fighter in my time, in like since I've started watching the sport, at least, right? Because that's within less than a year probably, or like just over a year. People went from absolutely rejoicing that he lost to the title to now absolutely wishing he had it back. Or maybe not wishing he had it back, but you understand what I'm trying to say here. So I went back and rewatched the fights, and I kind of wanted to share with you guys what I saw, what I learned from it, and sort of what just kind of how I feel about Kamaru Usman's title reign in hindsight. Starting off, we have Kamaru Usman's come up. He got his shot into the UFC by winning season 21 of The Ultimate Fighter. It was American Top Team versus Black Zillions, a gym versus gym theme, something I really wish they would do again, because like, especially after seeing how this prospects versus veterans thing worked out, it just kind of sucks. And I really like the idea of the concept of all these super gyms and stuff in MMA, and I think they could be, I feel like if that aspect of the sport was kind of focused on or emphasized a little bit more, there could be some really cool things done with it. But I digress. Kamaru Usman came in representing for the Black Zillions. Surprise, surprise. He got 2 pretty easy decision victories on the show itself, and then in the finale, he got a pretty nasty arm and head choke on Hayder Hassan.
Well, as far as Usman may be able to finish this. They don't come much bigger than Hayder Hassan. Look like a tap. That's it. Kamaru Usman comes up huge for the Black Zillions.
Usman won this fight with, pretty middling striking, but still very strong power, incredible pressure, and great wrestling. One of the judges even gave him a 10-8 in the first round. You'll notice as we go through this, Usman's been dominating since the beginning of his career. After he subs Hayder Hassan, he gets his UFC debut against a guy who we all know his name pretty well now, Leon Edwards. It's a pretty lackluster fight this first time around. Edwards couldn't really get too much going. Usman didn't exactly dominate in a super impressive way, but he definitely cleared him every round easily with just a bit of a power differential and the wrestling differential. Other than that, not much to say. Fast forward a little bit, Usman has a fight against a guy who at the time is just some unranked welterweight known as Sean Strickland. And this is an absolutely dominant performance from Kamaru Usman. Pillar to post, just absolutely It's the Kamaru show. First round, one judge gives him a 10-8. The second round, another judge gives him a 10-8. His defense is on point. Strickland only landed 30 strikes out of 108 attempted strikes. Usman landed 117 strikes, including that one giant overhand that absolutely floored Sean Strickland. I know you've all seen the clip.
A finish, though, would certainly be...
Big shot.
So we're all just gonna have a little smile as we reminisce on it. He also landed 2 takedowns throughout the fight. I'm just an absolutely dominant performance from Kamaru Usman, and if this fight didn't make you think he'd be a future champ, I don't know what it would have taken for you. Fast forward a bit further, and we have his last 2 wins before he finally got his title shot against the number 4 at the time, Damian Maia, and number 1, RDA. And both of these, very dominant performances. In the Damian Maia fight, he just stuffed every one of Maia's takedown attempts, not wanting to engage in the jiu-jitsu with him. And even though his striking was kind of mid, it was still better than Maia's. So outpowered him and slightly out-techniqued him to a comfortable decision. And pretty much the same thing with RDA, except RDA is a bit more versatile, so he had to dominate him in wrestling and striking. Regardless, though, still another comfortable unanimous decision, and pretty much made himself completely undeniable for that title shot, no matter how boring you think he might have been. Now, his fight against Tyron Woodley. This fight, not particularly exciting. I will concede that. But it was not Usman's fault. Woodley, absolutely gun-shy. He was terrified this entire fight. Why? I have no idea. He hasn't done anything but win and be champion for the last few fights before this. But all of a sudden, it seemed like his confidence just kind of dropped off a cliff. First round's just like comfortable domination. I mean, not even the first round. Every round is just Usman basically pressuring Woodley, corralling him against the cage, clinching him, uppercuts to the body, some foot stomps, some knees, takedowns, some kind of ground and pound. He doesn't really get a whole lot of it off when he's actually got Woodley on his back, but doesn't stop it from being any less dominating. I believe every judge gave him a 10-8 in the 4th round, and he might have gotten a couple other 10-8s throughout the fight. I mean, it's just pure domination from Usman. I don't know what more you want in a performance from a contender ripping the belt off a champion. You know what I mean? His first title defense, possibly the greatest fight of his career. Definitely one of my favorite MMA fights of all time. Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington won. This fight was an absolutely insane cardio fest, basically. Both these guys, absolutely insane wrestlers. So, you know what that means? Neither one of them shot a takedown the entire fight. There were a couple of feints early on, but after that, they both just kind of said, fuck it, and went to striking. Because they realized neither of them was going to try and take down the other one with how good of a wrestler they both are. They were both just like, it's not even worth it. And rewatching this fight, it becomes very obvious very quickly that the only reason Kamaru wins this fight is because he is so much more powerful than Colby. By the 3rd round, Usman has bruised, cut, and broken Colby's jaw. By the 3rd round, Usman maybe has a cut. Maybe, not even a cut. He might have a couple bruises on his face. That's like maybe. But that's about it, you know? If Colby didn't have pillow fist allegations before this fight would have 100% convicted him of it. Because you watch, the striking numbers are not that different. Usman and Colby doesn't really look gassed compared to Usman in this fight. He just looks a lot more hurt. But he never really looked like he actually got gassed. He was throwing better combos. He was throwing better strikes. If Colby had similar power to Usman, he probably would have actually knocked him out, given the fact that Colby was out there throwing head kicks and flying knees and, you know, more diverse set of strikes than just Usman's kind of 1-2 occasional hooks and teeps. But at the end of the day, power's the great equalizer, as we all know, and it sure equalized that fight. because Colby, I think, just kind of couldn't take it by the 5th round. You know, a broken jaw like that is not easy, especially when there's really no way to kind of protect it that well. You know, it's not like a hand or a leg where you can kind of just like put it to the back and leave it out of the way. Your jaw's right there. So honestly, I feel like it was more of a pain knockout than anything else at the end there. But this fight really proved that to me that these guys are basically the exact same person. Usman's just got more power, and it was really a shame for Colby. Usman versus Masvidal 1. Masvidal came in on short notice replacement for Gilbert Burns. This is in Fight Island. That's why they got the masks on and everything. Might be the most boring fight, I would say, of Usman's entire career. Or maybe not his entire career, but of his title reign. Masvidal used the first round, came out very, very fast, very explosive. I mean, the kind of speed he was showing off in that first round with the accuracy reminded me of why Masvidal was ever taken seriously as a threat in the first place. It kind of did seem like he was trying to just be extra fast twitch and extra powerful in that first round because he knew since it was short notice he didn't quite have it for all 5 rounds. So I think he was just kind of comfortable with either getting an early finish or resigning to losing kind of a lackluster decision and then playing it up for a rematch, which is more basically what went down because Usman, he did basically just enough to not let Usman finish him and not get 10-8'd, and Usman obviously had didn't want anything to do with striking with Masvidal. Understandably, at that time, Usman still wasn't a great striker. So it was a pretty lackluster clinch fest up against the cage with a lot of stomps and shoulder strikes, but comfortable decision for Usman nonetheless. Gilbert Burns fight. This is one of the better fights of Usman's career for sure. The first round, Gilbert comes out, starts pressuring Usman back, hits him with a few hard shots and wobbles Usman, something we'd never seen to that point, really. We never even really had seen Usman getting pressured back. You know, Colby did pressure him in that fight, but that was more of the two of them pressuring each other. So they were more moving with each other than necessarily one was getting pressured back. This one, Gilbert came right out and started pressuring Usman back, hitting him with hard shots. And Usman did a great job of sticking in there, you know. Didn't really retreat that much. He just kind of became a little more defensively sound, recovered pretty well in the pocket, still hit Gilbert with good shots. Didn't really let the first round get away from him all that much. And then the second round, he starts to pick it up the pace, popping that jab more. Really hurts Gilbert towards the end of that second round. And then 20 seconds into the third round, hits him with a counter jab as Gilbert's stepping in, drops him to his back, and just pounds him out and finishes it. And
trying to throw those big overheads and not allowing Usman to get to go.
Oh! Huge right from Usman. This could be the beginning of the end.
It's over. It's over. Oh, look at Burns.
He's surviving.
Usman switched southpaw.
And that will do it. And
that's
still.
This was one of the great fights that really demonstrated Usman's power. To do that with a jab, to do that with just basically simple 1-2s the entire time. Kamaru Usman's strength is on a different level. I can really see why people think he's roided up, because that level of cardio and that level of power mixed together is truly a problem. And of course, it had to be his knees giving out on him that would take him out of his prime and take away all that power. Ugh, such a shame. Such a shame. The Masvidal rematch. Probably Usman's greatest performance in his entire career, if you ask me. The first round was very similar to the first round of their first fight, except I would say it actually went worse for Masvidal. By this point, Usman's striking had improved a lot, not just from regular training, but also he had started training with Trevor Whitman, I believe, just before the Gilbert Burns fight, or just after it, one of the two. So this fight kind of really was when Usman's jab really kind of came to the front, really started to show off that power, and just better striking defense, better striking offense, really good accuracy, really good timing. You know, Whitman really just put his magic on that on that guy, and just he didn't plug the hole completely, but definitely put a good, strong Flex Seal strength Band-Aid on it. And, 50 fights later for Masvidal, Kamaru Usman is the first man to knock him out in spectacular fashion with that counter right hand. Shout out to Jorge Masvidal's corner for pouring that water on top of his head just before the second round so we could get that magnificent visual of all the water flying off as he gets absolutely floored. Beautiful. Beautiful. And, there's few better ways to make me an instant fan than knocking Masvidal out cold,
And of all the superlatives...
So, thank you, Kamaru. Thank you. After that, we have what ended up being Kamaru Usman's final title defense in the Colby Covington rematch. This fight, I remember hearing a lot of people thinking Colby might have won that, or that they had Colby winning it. Going back and rewatching the fight, it seemed so obviously for Usman, in my opinion, that I kind of really had to question. Like, I think all the people who are saying they had it for Colby was just the people who are, like, doing Colby's gimmick for Colby, essentially being like, oh yeah, Colby won that fight, guys. Don't even worry about it. He put CEO of EPO to sleep. No. Colby didn't win this fight, you guys. Usman won it 4-1. Colby only got the 4th round, and even then you can still give that round to Usman. If Colby was wearing the damage early and badly in their first fight, he wore it even worse and even earlier in this second fight. I shit you not. As soon as I looked up from my phone when the second round started, the first thing I saw was Colby like dripping blood from the side of his face and having scratches on the front. And I thought to myself immediately, oh my God, Usman looks absolutely like perfect in the face. And this is the start of the second round. Colby is already bleeding. This looks terrible. And yeah, it was just terrible. I mean, Colby never outstruck him, never landed the harder shots. Usman got one like definite takedown, and Colby got one maybe takedown throughout the fight. Even if you scored with pride rules, or if you scored like, I don't even know what kind of scoring method you could use to give Colby this fight. It really is just so obviously for Usman. And yeah, it was a pretty good back and forth fight too, not quite as exciting as their first one, I would say, but that's mostly because they're not quite slugging it out quite as hard. This is definitely a bit more of a technical affair, but still very good, very entertaining, especially if you're watching it live. The most dreaded fight of Kamaru Usman's career, the Leon Edwards rematch. I would say this one's more dreaded than the trilogy, because even though the trilogy really sealed it, this one's the most infamous moment that will live on forever. When you look up Kamaru Usman, you don't find pictures of Usman. You find pictures of Leon Edwards head kicking Kamaru Usman. Like it's they're doing him kind of dirty over there, but I get why. There's not really. It is the most infamous moment of his career outside of like maybe the Masvidal knockout, And you gotta kind of feel bad for Kamaru Usman when you look at this fight. If he had won this, he would have matched Anderson Silva for the longest win streak in UFC history, which is insane. I mean, the fact that he's second place to Anderson Silva's win streak is still pretty insane, If he had won this fight, he would have been... I think he's already clearly the second best welterweight of all time behind GSP. But if he had won this fight, he would have been even more clearly number 2. And, if he had won this fight, I wouldn't have hated you for trying to argue that he could have been better. Because the only real hole Usman ever really had was the striking. And if he could beat somebody like Edwards, who was a fantastic striker, that would have shown that. And he almost did. But, Usman was just a little bit better at striking and head movement and didn't duck into it. Or if Edwards hadn't done it, period. Who knows? But pound for pound headshot, dead. Great moment. Absolutely fantastic moment. A moment that will live on in MMA history forever. It just sucks for Kamaru that he had to be on the receiving end of it. So now, after looking through his entire title reign, rewatching all of these fights and kind of scoring them myself and giving my evaluations on them as I go through it, I have to say Kamaru Usman's title reign was pretty exciting. I could definitely, looking back on it, I remember 100% why we were all so hyped, riding the wave so high. I agree that he's definitely maybe not quite as good as we had originally made him out to be, but you always kind of overrate the guy, especially when you're in the middle of everything and it's all like everything's new and shiny and exciting and you're going, what's next? Oh my God, can he continue the domination? And it kind of makes your mind run wild. And now that he's not champion, you kind of have to look at everything a little more objectively and with a little more like pessimism to it, I guess you could say. But I want to say 100%, I really like Usman. He was not a dirty fighter. You know, going back and watching these fights, he really didn't cheat much at all, if ever. I would say like maybe a couple. There was like a couple moments in some of the Edwards fights. And maybe a couple other moments throughout. I really didn't see it though, you know? He really didn't get called on it. You really didn't see other fighters protesting. So I don't know what a lot of people were on about with that whole thing for him. And in terms of performances, usually if the fight was boring, it really wasn't his fault. You know, like the Woodley fight's not his fault. The Masvidal one, you know, it was short notice replacement, and we all know how dangerous Masvidal is on the feet, especially with anybody that's that explosive. You don't really want to risk that knockout. So can you really blame him, especially when it was short notice like that? Because we all saw what he did in the rematch. So can we kind of let that one slide a little bit? But, you know, at the end of the day, Kamaru Usman is a top 15 MMA fighter of all time, if you ask me. Top 15 GOAT. He's definitely, I mean, to have your win streak be second only to Anderson Silva, who is like one of the top 4 GOATs, that's pretty good. You know, he doesn't have any like super high caliber competition wins, but they're not bad caliber of competition for sure. And at the end of the day, can we just look at how dominant he was? I mean, he got 10-8s in almost every fight on his way to the title, and like half of his title fights had 10-8s. This man really put on shows for us every time. He was very active, fighting, I believe, twice a year at minimum, basically. And putting on great performances. The first Colby fight, absolute banger. The Masvidal knockout was a banger. The Colby rematch was a great technical fight. The Gilbert Burns fight was an awesome back and forth, you know. What more can you say? It was really just about everything I could have wanted from a champion, other than maybe less rematches. But you can't even get too mad at him for the rematches because they were all pretty justified. You know, Colby was the number 1 contender. They had a super close fight. Colby won another fight in between, so he got a rematch. Makes sense. The Masvidal, he was number 4 when he took the fight on short notice. He lost, but it was on short notice. So then he gets his rematch. And Masvidal's a big star too. So obviously rules bend a little bit there. But even under normal circumstances, I would argue Masvidal could deserve that rematch. He didn't rematch Burns. And when you look at that fight, there's no way to justify it. You look at the Colby and the Masvidal ones, there's ways to justify it. And they're not reaches either, like some of the Izzy justifications for a rematch. No, Usman's rematches had perfectly viable and reasonable justifications. So, I think we all need, my final thoughts for Kamaru Usman in hindsight, we all need to cut the man a little bit of slack. He was a great, active champion, a top 15 of all time talent, in my opinion. And give the man his flowers, whether you like him personally or not. You got to respect him. You got to respect the skills. Second greatest welterweight of all time to GSP. Fantastic fighter. Great power, great wrestling, great cardio, great pressure. Might be CEO of EPO, but until it's proven, it's all just speculation. And I don't ride with speculation. All right. So thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think of what you thought of Kamaru Usman in his career. what you think of the current welterweight title picture. And yeah, thank you for watching, and stay violent.